On Friday, President Obama will travel to Charleston to deliver the eulogy for Reverend Clemente Pinckney. Today, at the South Carolina State House, where Reverend Pinckney served as a state senator, his desk was shrouded in black. This afternoon, Republican Governor Nikki Haley announced this.
15 years ago, after much contentious debate, South Carolina came together in a bipartisan way to move the flag from atop the Capitol dome. Today, we are here in a moment of unity in our state, without ill will, to say it's time to move the flag from the Capitol grounds. My hope is that by removing a symbol that divides us, we can move forward as a state in harmony, and we can honor the 9 blessed souls who are now in heaven.
On Sunday, the Emanuel AME Church in Charleston opened its doors again with a service which Governor Haley and her family attended. Norvell Goff opened the service with a reading of the names of the people who were murdered in that church just 4 days earlier.
Let us remember those who lost their lives on last Wednesday evening. Reverend Clemente Pinckney, the Reverend Dr. Daniel Simmons, the Reverend Sharonda Coleman Singleton, Brother Tawanza Sanders, Sister DuPain Middleton Doctor, Sister Cynthia Hurd, Myra Thompson, Sister Ethel Lance, Sister Susie Jackson. Reminded this morning about the freshness of death comes like a thief in the night. But I declare that Jesus said it a long time ago. He said, I am the resurrection and the life. Come now. The altar is open. Bring your burdens to the Lord and leave them there. Whether you're praying for yourself or the 9 families, realizing that earth has no sorrow, that heaven cannot heal.
The service was one of remembrance and mourning and of hope.
For those of us who are here this morning, I want you to know, because the doors of Mother Emanuel is open on this Sunday, it sends a message to every demon in hell and on earth. No weapon! Somebody say, no weapon! No weapon formed against us shall prosper. No weapon formed against us. Some wanted to divide the race, black and white and brown, but no weapon formed against us shall prosper.
We're joined by a special panel tonight to consider the events of the last few days in Charleston. Eugene Robinson, columnist for the Washington Post and MSNBC contributor. Mark Thompson, the host of Make It Plain on Sirius XM Radio. Janai Nelson, the Associate Director Counsel of the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund. And Guy-Uriel Charles, Director of the Duke Law Center on Law, Race, and Politics. Eugene Robinson, as our resident South Carolinian here at MSNBC, I just want to get your general reaction to everything that's occurred in the last few days, including the Sunday service and what we saw the governor do today.
How much time do we have?
We have the hour. We have the hour. You're all going to be here for the hour. I want you to take your time.
Obviously, last Wednesday was stunning and tragic and weeping. I mean, it was just it's just awful to think of the significance of that church, a very important church. My mother's side of the family came from Charleston. My great-great-grandfather had a blacksmith shop that was kind of not very far from where Mother Emanuel Church is, actually. And at the end of Calhoun Street are the old docks, where a very significant proportion of the African slaves brought to this country were offloaded, and it's now being turned into a museum area. It's shocking. Today, completely different. Today, I was stunned at that tableau of Governor Nikki Haley, flanked by the African-American Republican elected senator from South Carolina, Tim Scott, Lindsey Graham, Jim Clyburn, Haley herself, an Indian American, saying that the time had come to take the Confederate flag away, and giving what I thought was quite a good speech, actually. Obviously, we have a long, long way to go in this country, and what I write about in my column for tomorrow is racism. Racism. It's here. It's still here. That's what caused this. That's the root of what Dylann Roof did, and he didn't make it up. He absorbed it. He ingested it. It was in the air. It's still there, like a foul emanation from the sewer. And we have so much work to do to get rid of it. But I got to say that today made me more hopeful, certainly, than I've been since Wednesday. And maybe more hopeful than I've been in a long time. That was the South Carolina I grew up in. Nothing like that would ever happen. Absolutely impossible.
You mean what happened today?
What happened today?
Yes.
Right.
With politicians across the aisle joining in that situation.
Across the aisle, this sort of multiracial picture of a state that has, that's always been the true picture of the state, right? South Carolina, at the time of the Civil War, was one of the few states where there were actually more black people than white people. So it's always that's always been the true nature of South Carolina, but you never saw it at the high councils of power. And you certainly, to get rid of the flag on the Capitol grounds, which was such an issue, a contentious, passion-filled issue in South Carolina, to do the right thing in South Carolina. Amazing.
Mark Thompson, if the Confederate flag does not belong at the state capitol, why did it belong there at the beginning of last week?
Well,
look what it took to change minds.
No, it never did. And not only would this not have happened, what happened today when Gene lived there, this would not have happened a week ago today, because there was no movement on this. And this has been a very disturbing issue for a number of years, for decades. And we know that it has been there. It started on the Dome in '62. So it's mythical that this ever had anything to do with the Confederacy. This was in response and retaliation for the burgeoning civil rights movement at the time. Strom Thurmond himself was one of the architects in putting it there. So even now when you hear people talk about Confederate pride and all of that, that wasn't the original motive for that flag. And there's still a very, very long way to go. Today was an important step, though, and hopefully the legislature will heed the governor's call and move it. That remains to be seen. That remains to be seen. Yeah, there's still a couple of political obstacles that need to be worked out. But you know, it has been an incredible week. It took this terrible tragedy, the martyrdom of 9 people, to move that flag. This tragedy that occurred on the day that Denmark Vesey, one of the people who organized that church, would have had a slave insurrection. And I don't think that Dylann Storm Roof was unaware of that either. It took that terrible and heinous act in order for that flag to be brought down. There's still a bit more to go. As a matter of fact, money talks too. The NAACP actually never announced the formal end of economic sanctions as a result of that flag. But also today, when Walmart made a decision that no longer will Confederate merchandise be sold in their stores, that was also a very clear signal to this governor, to Lindsey Graham, who's been hesitant to say it's about race, to say it's about Christian persecution. It was important to even see him there, because that means he even had to walk back from his original position. So today's an historic day, but we still, as Gene said, we still have a lot more to do to end racism and white supremacy.
And I know we'll have a chance to talk about this, but there's more than the flag, too.
Yes.
The flag is much more than civil. There's a whole lot more than the flag.
Janai Charles, you're with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, which Thurgood Marshall was running back in 1954 when he won the Brown case in the Supreme Court. And we can trace, as Mark pointed out, the resurgence of the Confederate flag to 1954. The South was basically ignoring it, and then they started raising it to say this. This was taken as an expression against the Supreme Court ruling.
That's absolutely right. You cannot divorce the desegregation efforts of the Legal Defense Fund and other civil rights organizations and this resurgence of white supremacy that occurred in the late 50s and into the 1960s. And the flag was no longer this sign of Confederate pride. This became a white supremacist symbol. This was a banner of hate, a banner of oppression, and a banner that really has no place in this society. What this really underscores for me is how difficult easy questions are for us, how difficult it is for us to confront our history, how difficult it is for us to simply say once and for all that that Confederate flag has no place. And if you think about what just happened last week, the United States Supreme Court, just one day, the morning after this massacre, decided in a very narrow decision, a 5-4 ruling, that the state of Texas is permitted to deny individuals the right to use the Confederate flag on license plates. That was a 5-4 decision. It was narrow. That means we have 4 justices on our Supreme Court who believe that it is okay, that that's still a valid expression of individualism that a state can sponsor. That is absolutely absurd in 2015 to think that we're still debating these issues. So to me, today's decision shows us that what should really be an absolute obvious answer is something that we're still grappling with as a nation, because we are finding it so difficult to confront not only our history, but the current effects of racism in America.
Mr. Charles, go ahead.
Lawrence, if I may, and I agree with Janai there, one of the things that's also remarkable is that it still takes tragedy, the loss of African-American lives, in order to move this country forward. And I think that is a sad commentary, as wonderful as this day is as a moment of progress. But one of the things that we learned from the civil rights movement is the shedding of blood, of African-American blood, moves things forward. And I hope that that is not a legacy of what happened in South Carolina. That is not a legacy of how we get progress forward, that getting racial equality should not take the shedding of blood, especially the continual shedding of African-American blood.
All right, we're going to take a break here. When we come back, we will discuss that point of where did Dylann Roof learn to hate this way. That's coming up.